Hey everyone, welcome back to NPA Discovery, the place where we go beyond the headlines to uncover the truth behind the fame. If you're someone who enjoys stories of success, scandal, and the complexity of human ambition, you're in the right place. Today, we're diving into the fascinating, controversial, and ultimately cautionary tale of Todd Chrisley. You know him as the impeccably dressed Southern patriarch from Chrisley Knows Best. But beneath the designer suits, luxury cars, and comedic family moments was a much more complicated story, one filled with ambition, secrets, and shocking twists that shook fans to their core. The title of this video says it all: the rise, fall, and shocking reality of Todd Chrisley. And if you think you know his story, I'm here to tell you, you've only scratched the surface. But before we get into the real story, please do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs to hear a powerful lesson about fame, family, and what happens when your image becomes your prison. Humble beginnings and unshakable ambition. Todd Chrisley was born on April 6, 1969, in Georgia. He didn't come from money, far from it. His early life was modest, built on Southern traditions and small-town values. He wasn't born into a mansion. He didn't grow up with a silver spoon. But what he did have, perhaps even more valuable, was drive. Todd always believed he was meant for something more. He once said, "You can be born broke, but you don't have to die broke." That attitude became the foundation of his empire. Todd started in real estate and quickly made a name for himself as someone with bold vision and bigger-than-life confidence. He founded Chrisley Asset Management, and for a while, it seemed like he'd cracked the code to wealth. Lavish homes. Flashy lifestyle. The image of success became his trademark. But here's the twist: when you build your life around looking rich instead of being financially sound, the cracks begin to show, eventually. Let's pause for a moment. Have you ever seen someone driving an expensive car, posting glamorous vacations, wearing designer labels, and thought, wow, they must really have it all together? That's the power of image. But in today's world of filters, branding, and reality TV, what we see is often just a well-lit version of chaos. Todd Chrisley didn't just create a life, he curated a brand. He built an empire on the appearance of perfection. And for a time, it worked. This brings us to the moment Todd became a household name. Chrisley Knows Best, and the rise to fame. In 2014, the USA Network premiered Chrisley Knows Best, and Todd became an overnight sensation. Viewers couldn't get enough of the sarcastic, overprotective, often hilarious father who ruled his family with a velvet fist. His wife Julie, their kids, Savannah, Chase, Grayson, everyone played a role in this well-oiled Southern sitcom. At first glance, it was funny, lighthearted, and feel-good TV. But behind the scenes, the cracks were widening. Despite the show portraying Todd as a self-made millionaire, reports began surfacing that his finances weren't as stable as he claimed. Lawsuits. Bankruptcy filings. Allegations. The media started asking tough questions, and fans were forced to reconcile the image with the reality. This is a lesson many of us forget: television shows are produced. What you're seeing is a character, not necessarily a person. Todd was both the creator and the actor in a story that was getting harder and harder to control. Legal battles and the fall from grace. In 2019, Todd and Julie Chrisley were indicted by a federal grand jury on multiple charges, including tax evasion, wire fraud, and conspiracy to defraud the United States. Let that sink in. The man who once flaunted his wealth on TV, who built his brand on perfection and moral values, was now facing the very public unraveling of his empire. Federal prosecutors alleged that the Chrisleys used false documents to obtain millions in bank loans and later used a production company to hide their income. It wasn't just about unpaid taxes, it was about deliberate deception. And while Todd and Julie claimed innocence and insisted the charges were politically motivated or based on betrayal by former employees, the evidence was mounting. In 2022, both Todd and Julie were found guilty. Todd was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. Julie received 7 years. It was a fall so dramatic, it left fans, and critics, speechless. But this story isn't just about legal proceedings. It's about identity. When we build our lives on perfection, we forget how heavy the mask becomes. The effort to uphold an image, to silence the truth, to avoid vulnerability, it drains the soul. Todd Chrisley became a symbol of something bigger, how the American dream, when built on illusion, can quickly become a nightmare. Think about this. What happens when your biggest achievement becomes your greatest burden? When the role you played swallows the person you are. There's something tragic about that. Todd Chrisley, from a southern real estate mogul turned reality TV icon, to a man serving a 12-year sentence for federal crimes. But the story doesn't end with a verdict. In many ways, that's where it really begins. Today, we look at the human side of the headlines. The pain behind the punchlines. And most importantly, the life lessons that come when everything else has been stripped away. Emotional toll on family. When the gavel came down in that Georgia courtroom, the Chrisley family didn't just lose their patriarch and matriarch, they lost their foundation. Todd and Julie's children were suddenly thrust into the harsh light of adulthood, forced to carry the emotional and practical burdens of a family in freefall. Savannah Chrisley, the family's shining daughter and media darling, spoke openly in interviews about the devastation. She described the pain of visiting her parents behind bars. The shame. The heartbreak. But also, the resilience. She stepped up to care for her younger brother Grayson and niece Chloe, becoming a guardian almost overnight. In one podcast episode, Savannah said something that stuck with me: "I didn't choose this path, but I'm going to walk it with my head held high." That's courage. And it's a reminder that the children of the famous often bear the heaviest cost when things fall apart. Media frenzy and public perception. Public opinion shifted quickly. Once adored for their cheeky humor and southern charm, the Chrisleys became tabloid fodder. Memes. Hashtags. Judgment. But let's ask ourselves, do we delight too much in watching someone fall? Sure, Todd Chrisley made mistakes, serious, costly mistakes. But the way society reacts often says as much about us as it does about the person in the spotlight. We love a success story. But we're obsessed with a downfall. Let's remember, justice must be served, but compassion must never be forgotten. The question of redemption. Now comes the most important question of all: can Todd Chrisley redeem himself? The answer isn't simple. Redemption isn't just about paying your debt to society, it's about reckoning with the truth, making amends, and choosing to change. There are stories emerging that Todd is ministering to fellow inmates, trying to serve in any way he can. He's reportedly started journaling, praying, and reconnecting with his faith. Whether or not you believe in his sincerity, there is something to be said for anyone who uses their darkest hour to seek light. Lessons for all of us. Todd Chrisley's story is not just about crime and punishment. It's a mirror. How many of us build facades to hide our pain? How many of us define ourselves by appearances, only to lose our identity? How many of us are one bad decision away from a fall of our own? The story of Todd Chrisley reminds us to stay humble. To be real. To tell the truth even when it's hard. Because no amount of fame, fortune, or applause can protect us from the consequences of dishonesty. But here's the silver lining: rock bottom can be a solid foundation to rebuild from. An empowering message. As we close this chapter, let me say this to anyone watching who feels like they've messed up beyond repair: you are not your mistakes. Your worth is not defined by your worst day. And while accountability is necessary, so is hope. Todd Chrisley may never return to the life he once knew, but he has a chance to become something greater: a man who turned pain into purpose. A father who taught his kids what not to do. A public figure who finally became fully human. And maybe, just maybe, that's what redemption really looks like. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so we can keep bringing you real stories that matter. See you in the next video. Until then, stay grounded, stay kind, and remember, the truth, no matter how painful, will always set you free.